Have you ever wondered why some people seem to effortlessly attract others like magnets? Today you'll discover the secret that will completely change how you interact with others. And no, we're not talking about cheap tricks or manipulation. It's something much deeper. In the next few minutes, you'll learn to master the art of attraction through intelligent detachment. The biggest mistake most people make in relationships is becoming too accessible, too predictable, too available. They're constantly checking their phone, responding to messages instantly, and basically handing over all their power on a silver platter. Sound familiar? Probably, because we've all done it at some point. But today, that changes. Neil Strauss explains it perfectly. Attraction isn't a choice, it's a response to perceived scarcity. This means that whatever is easy to obtain automatically loses value, while what seems unattainable becomes irresistible. It's not about mind games, it's basic psychology. Imagine this. You're in a store and you see two identical products. One is available in large quantities, and the other is the last unit with a sign saying limited edition. Which one sparks your interest more? The second one, obviously. The same thing happens in human relationships. When you're completely accessible, you become a shelf product. But when you learn the art of strategic inaccessibility, you transform into that limited edition everyone wants. The first step to mastering this art is controlling your emotional reactions. Every time you react impulsively to someone you're interested in, you're giving away your power. You respond to their messages immediately, you're always available to see them, you appear eager for their attention, and without realizing it, you've lost all your mystery. Have you noticed how the people who've obsessed you the most were precisely those whose reactions you couldn't predict? Exactly. Unpredictability generates interest. Neil Strauss states that mystery is like an emotional magnet, and he's absolutely right. When they can't read you like an open book, they're forced to pay more attention, to invest more energy in figuring you out. Here's a practical exercise. The next time you receive a message from someone you're interested in, wait at least an hour before responding. Notice how you feel. You'll probably feel anxiety, the urge to answer immediately. That sensation is your emotional dependency manifesting itself. Now take a deep breath and remember, whoever controls their reactions controls the dynamic. Mentally repeat, my time is valuable. I don't respond out of obligation, but by choice. But be careful. It's not about ignoring for the sake of ignoring. It's about creating space for interest to emerge. As Strauss says, it's not about absence but selective presence. The difference is crucial. Ignoring out of spite or manipulation is toxic. Strategic ignoring is establishing a healthy boundary that communicates your value. And we'll talk about that in the next point, because once you master controlling your reactions, it's time to understand the power of space and silence. Did you know that silence is one of the most powerful communication tools that exists? In a world where everyone is competing to be heard, the person who knows how to strategically remain silent gains an immediate advantage. Neil Strauss explains it perfectly. Silence creates a vacuum that the other person feels the need to fill, and it's precisely in that vacuum where obsession arises. Think about the last time someone stopped communicating with you without explanation. Didn't they occupy your thoughts much more than those who are always available? Didn't you wonder what they were doing, who they were with, why they weren't responding? This psychological phenomenon is called the Zeigarnik effect, and it describes our tendency to remember unfinished tasks or unresolved situations with much more intensity. The problem is that most people are afraid of silence. They fear that if they don't maintain constant contact, they'll be forgotten. But the truth is exactly the opposite. Strauss points out that excessive familiarity kills desire. When you're constantly present, you become part of the landscape, something taken for granted. Here's a transformative exercise. Identify someone with whom you maintain constant communication. For the next 3 days, drastically reduce your availability. Don't initiate conversations, respond with shorter messages, and take longer to reply. Observe how the dynamic changes. In most cases, you'll notice an increase in interest from the other party, who will begin to initiate more conversations and invest more energy. But remember, this isn't a power game. It's a way to reclaim your center and establish a healthy balance. As Strauss says, attraction isn't about chasing, but attracting. When you create space, you allow the other person to come to you by choice, not out of obligation or habit. The real key to the power of silence lies in using those moments of absence to enrich your own life. You're not ignoring to manipulate, you're prioritizing your personal growth. And paradoxically, this makes you much more attractive. People can sense when someone has a full and passionate life, and that generates irresistible curiosity. If you really want to master this, you need to understand that silence isn't just external, but also internal. Stop constantly thinking about that person. Stop checking their social media. Stop fantasizing about future scenarios. Mental detachment is as important as communicational detachment. Repeat this phrase every morning. My peace of mind is my priority. I don't depend on anyone's attention or validation. And we'll talk about that in the next point, because once you've created that space, it's time to understand the power of controlled unpredictability. Monotony is the silent killer of attraction. When you become completely predictable, you transform into something safe, comfortable, and boring. Neil Strauss expresses it clearly. Routine is the enemy of desire. Think about it. Have you ever been so hooked on a TV series that you couldn't stop watching it? Why? Because each episode left you with unanswered questions, unexpected twists, suspended expectations. Relationships work similarly. When you're an open book, when you're always available the same day at the same time, when your behavior is 100% predictable, you eliminate all mystery. And without mystery, there's no intrigue. Without intrigue, there's no obsession. Controlled unpredictability doesn't mean being inconsistent or unreliable in your values. It means introducing variability in your availability and communication patterns. One day you respond quickly, another day you take hours. One weekend you're available, the next you disappear because you have plans. This variability keeps the other person in a state of heightened attention, never knowing exactly what to expect. Strauss explains that uncertainty amplifies emotions. When someone can't predict your next move, their brain enters an alert state that intensifies any emotion they feel toward you. That's why tumultuous relationships tend to be so addictive. The emotional roller coaster creates a psychological dependency. But watch out, we're not talking about playing with anyone's feelings. We're talking about maintaining your own independence and avoiding falling into predictable patterns that kill interest. Have you subscribed to the channel yet? If this content is opening your eyes, make sure to hit the bell to not miss the upcoming videos, where we'll dive even deeper into these concepts. Here's a practical exercise. The next time someone invites you out, instead of immediately saying yes, as you probably always do, respond, "Let me check my schedule and I'll confirm." This simple change sends a powerful message. You have a life beyond that person, and your time is valuable. Then occasionally say you can't because you already have plans. This isn't lying, it's prioritizing your personal space, which is also a legitimate plan. Something fascinating happens when you apply this. The person starts to value the time they spend with you more because now it's a scarce resource. As Strauss says, what is difficult to obtain is valued more. When you're not always available, the moments you share acquire special value. Repeat this mantra. My inaccessibility isn't arrogance, it's a reflection of my value. Because when you treat yourself as someone valuable whose time and attention must be earned, others will treat you the same way. And we'll talk about that in the next point, because once you've introduced unpredictability into the equation, it's time to understand the power of reverse emotional investment. There's a fundamental psychological principle that very few understand. In any social dynamic, whoever is less emotionally invested has more power. Neil Strauss explains it perfectly. Whoever cares less controls the relationship. This doesn't mean being cold or dismissive. It means you've developed the ability to maintain your emotional center regardless of what happens in the relationship. Think about the times you've been completely hooked on someone. You probably constantly checked your phone, analyzed every word of their messages, and felt an emotional roller coaster with each interaction. Did you feel powerful in those moments? Of course not. You felt vulnerable, anxious, dependent. You had given away all your power. Reverse emotional investment consists of allowing the other person to invest more in you than you invest in them. Not because you're playing a manipulative game, but because you're focused on your own life and your own goals. When someone perceives that you're not desperate for their attention or approval, they automatically wonder why. And that question triggers intrigue. Strauss affirms that the person who is willing to walk away has the control. It's not about constantly threatening to leave, but about having the genuine security that you'll be fine no matter what happens. This attitude is magnetic because it's extremely rare. In a world where most people desperately seek external validation, someone who remains centered on themselves immediately stands out. Here's a practical exercise. The next time you're with someone you're interested in, pay attention to who's asking more questions, who's showing more interest, who's investing more energy in the interaction. If it's you, consciously take a step back. Let the other person fill in the conversation spaces. Let them wonder more about you instead of voluntarily revealing everything. Have you noticed how most people talk too much when they're nervous or insecure? They talk and talk, trying to impress, revealing too much, explaining excessively. All these are signs of high emotional investment. In contrast, someone with low emotional investment observes more, listens more, reveals less, and maintains an air of mystery that is irresistible. Remember this phrase from Strauss: desire is more powerful than satisfaction. When you maintain a certain emotional distance, you create space for desire to grow. The person wonders what you're thinking, what you're feeling if you're interested, and that uncertainty fuels attraction. But don't confuse low emotional investment with coldness or indifference. It's about maintaining your center, not being insensitive. You can show genuine interest without abandoning your emotional independence. The trick is not to put all your emotional chips on one person. Repeat this mantra daily. My happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. I choose to share my life, not surrender it. This mindset will transform not only how others perceive you, but how you feel about yourself. And we'll talk about that in the next point, because once you've mastered reverse emotional investment, it's time to understand the ultimate power of attention redirection. The fifth and possibly most powerful principle for generating obsession is attention redirection. Neil Strauss explains it masterfully. Attention is like sunlight. What you illuminate grows. Most people make the mistake of focusing all their attention on the person they're interested in, but the true masters of attraction do exactly the opposite. They redirect their attention to themselves and other aspects of their lives. When you focus all your energy on one person, you're giving them immense power over your emotional state. But when you redirect that attention to your personal growth, your passions, your friendships, and your goals, two magical things happen. First, you become genuinely more interesting. Second, you create a vacuum that the other person feels the need to fill. Think about the most attractive people you know. Are they those who live pending on others, or those who have an exciting life of their own? The answer is obvious. As Strauss says, passion is the universal aphrodisiac. When you're passionate about something, when you have purpose and direction, you generate a gravitational force that naturally attracts others. The mistake many make is thinking that to generate interest, they must pretend disinterest. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's not about pretending, it's about genuinely investing your energy in yourself. When you really focus on your growth and your passions, ignoring happens naturally, effortlessly, because you're simply too busy living your life to be constantly pending on someone else. Here's a transformative exercise. Make a list of 3 activities or projects that you've abandoned or postponed because you've dedicated too much attention to your relationships. Now, commit to resuming one of them this very week. Dedicate at least 3 hours to it. Observe how you feel about yourself after this time. Most report a sense of power and self-sufficiency that proves tremendously attractive to others. Strauss points out that attraction isn't pursued, it's attracted. When you redirect your attention to yourself, you create a magnetic force that makes others naturally approach. You're no longer chasing, you're attracting. And this is a crucial distinction that completely changes the power dynamic in any interaction. Isn't it fascinating how human psychology works? If you're receiving value from this video, make sure to give it a like and share it with someone who you think could benefit from this knowledge. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the perfect time to do so. Attention redirection has another incredible benefit. It protects you emotionally. When your happiness and satisfaction depend primarily on yourself and your own projects, you're no longer vulnerable to someone else's mood swings or availability. You become emotionally unattainable, and paradoxically, this makes you much more desirable. Observe people who are always surrounded by suitors. What do they have in common? They all seem to be completely absorbed in their own world. They're not desperate for attention or validation because they get their satisfaction from their own lives. As Strauss says, need repels, fullness attracts. Practice this daily mantra. My attention is my most valuable resource, and I consciously choose where to invest it. Because when you treat your attention as the precious resource it is, others will value it more too. Attention redirection is so powerful that even when you're physically present with someone, it can generate an irresistible tension. Imagine being on a date, and instead of being completely focused on pleasing the other person, you're comfortably in your center, occasionally talking about your passions, asking genuine questions, but keeping part of your attention on the present moment, on the food, on the atmosphere. This partial presence, paradoxically, generates more attraction than desperate attention. When you master these 5 principles, control of your emotional reactions, the power of space and silence, controlled unpredictability, reverse emotional investment, and attention redirection, you not only become more attractive to others, but you fundamentally transform your relationship with yourself. You're no longer a reactive person whose value depends on external validation. You become someone centered, confident, and magnetic. And here's the truth that few understand. Ignoring correctly isn't a manipulation technique. It's the natural result of valuing yourself enough to not indiscriminately give away your emotional power. It's the fruit of a centered and full life where relationships are a complement, not a desperate need. Neil Strauss sums it up perfectly. True seduction isn't about conquering another, but conquering yourself. When you conquer yourself, when you become your own priority, when your happiness no longer depends on anyone else, you naturally become unattainable. And what's unattainable always generates fascination. The path to mastery in this art isn't easy. It requires consistency, self-awareness, and the willingness to challenge deeply rooted patterns. But I promise you that the results will transform not only your romantic relationships, but all your social interactions. If you really want to be unattainable, if you want to generate that magnetism that makes others obsess over you, start implementing these principles today. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, but right now. The perfect moment never comes. Transformation begins with a decision. Comment below the following declaration to seal your commitment to this change. I choose to be unattainable. My attention is valuable, and I invest it first in myself. Share this video with someone who you think needs to hear this message. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the time to do so to receive more content that will transform the way you relate to others, and most importantly, to yourself. Remember, true attraction isn't pursued, it's generated from within. And when you master the art of ignoring correctly, you don't need to chase anyone because others will come to you, fascinated by that mystery you've created, not through tricks or manipulation, but by genuinely being the owner of yourself and your attention.